Today, we have a very special episode. I have invited my business partner and co-captain to tell our story. Together, we built a firm that defied the odds, beating the brutal 10-year small business survival rate and 5xing our growth in the process. We discuss how we went from scrappy post-COVID recovery to building a scalable, exit-ready machine, and why so many of our business owner clients are trying to replicate that very playbook. In this episode, we talk about the difference between surviving and thriving, the power of delegation, and why every business owner needs to stop waiting for a sale to think about their exit. Plus, how AI, shifting markets, and even interest rates are going to reshape how businesses are valued and run over the next decade. So if you're a founder wondering how to build value without losing your mind or your marriage, this is the conversation you want to hear.
Hey everyone, welcome to Business Unchained, where entrepreneurs and business owners come together to power up on their journey to greatness. My name is Bobby Mascia, owner of many businesses, including my passion, a wealth management firm that specializes in helping entrepreneurs. My life totally changed when I made a conscious decision to design my businesses to run themselves, not me and my time. If you're looking to get unchained from your business, make more money, and have more time, listen to the experiences of other successful entrepreneurs here on Business Unchained.
Bobby Mascia is the founder and CEO of Greenridge Wealth Planning. All opinions expressed by Bobby and his guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinion of Greenridge Wealth Planning. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for any financial decisions. Clients of Greenridge Wealth Planning may maintain positions in any securities discussed in this podcast.
Please welcome my partner, the one and only JK, Jordan Kaufman.
So, dude, Greenridge, 10 years in business. Literally a third of businesses make it past 10 years. The rest seem to just evaporate, disappear. They don't make it. And I think we have a really interesting story to tell, which is why I wanted to have you on here, because, we're constantly talking about business owners that, that we have as clients, that we're working with, on the podcast. And we are business owners ourselves. And I'd love to just kind of dive into this, because I think, if we just look at the basics, 5 years, I had Greenridge, and it was really post-COVID when I hit that huge hockey stick in growth. It took me about 5 years to put this thing together. You and I talked for 2 of the latter part of that time frame. It took us about 2 years to kind of come together. And since then, since you came into the firm, we've 5x'd it over the last 5 years. Like, that's a pretty impressive growth. And a lot of the conversation that we have with clients is really trying to replicate what it is that we've done and mixing in a unique fashion what we do as a profession with the planning. I think if you just look at the last 5 years, what are some of the elements that you can reflect back to? I know that Jess wanted us to do the top 10 things in 10 years in business, but what are some of the things that you kind of look back and just say, thinking about our business owners that are listening to this podcast today, things that are happening in the markets, things that are happening in business, what should we be keeping our eyes open for?
Well, there was one unique thing that when we, hitched our ships together, it was a very awkward, weird time where I don't think any business owner in any business knew what the heck tomorrow held. We didn't either. And versus having to try to juggle 85 different things, we got to kind of compartmentalize our own things that we focused on. And I think that was incredibly beneficial for our ability to focus, tackle new challenges. I think you guys did a post which illustrated kind of that mindset of wearing, 10 hats and then giving hats away and things like that. And then when you only have one hat, it's a lot easier to kind of pivot and move versus trying to juggle 10 hats that are, waving in the, ready to capsize at any moment. So that probably, in my mind, us and really more you having the ambition to delegate, find new people, build on what we have, have a growth mindset. I think having a growth mindset is one of the biggest challenges that some of those businesses that don't make it past that 10 years, you grow to a certain point, you get comfortable, stuff starts looking scary, your business requires a big investment, and someone's got to really get over that obstacle of fear that, well, this has worked up until now. Why would I change the recipe? Sometimes the recipe needs to be changed. So those are, you need to be willing to do that. I think that was the biggest factor from day one. The challenges we were dealing with COVID, a changing environment, changing ways that people interacted. Our back office changed almost entirely. It used to be all wet signatures, if you remember, went to all electronic signatures. I don't remember spending more than 10 seconds thinking about that whole process and what changes needed to be implemented. And I don't think that you spent much more than that either. Other people spent that time, and it gave us time to free up and think about the stuff that we needed to think about, because were we going to come up with the best solution there? I don't know. Is it really worth us spending the time there versus what ultimately transpired and what came up with? I have no edits to date. So delegating, coming up with, people doing and focusing on the work that they want to focus on, freeing up your time to focus on what you need. That is one of the biggest lessons, I think, and one that we are constantly reiterating to both clients we work with or even just colleagues and people we run into. That's something that I think we've seen as one of the greatest amplifiers to our growth.
You mentioned something about evolution and, the business owner that says, I don't need to evolve. I don't need to do something different. It's been working today. And, sometimes I look at that and I'm like, all right, well, is that a control thing where they just don't want to give up the control? They feel like they have the control of what's in front of them right now. And the idea of doing something different is so foreign to them that they can't get out of their own way. Do you think that it's complacency? I don't want to make that investment because I'm afraid that if I do, I'm not going to actually grow. I'm okay. I don't need to take the risk. I've already taken risks in my life. What do you think really is the mindset? Because a lot of what we're working with business owners on is mindset.
Yeah. Well,
no,
it is. But I think that when we paint business owners with a very broad brush of all business owners must be like this, I think when we really go down and think about the experiences that different, whether they be clients or just people we know and interact with and engage with, there are many different types of business owners. There's many different flavors to why they're different. Can be age. I'm young. I'm here to grow. I'm here to take risk. I want to win, or I'm willing to, lose and totally spin out and fly off the course if that's what it means happening. And I'll just go back and do a normal job if that's what happens, but I'm going to see my vision through. You've got older entrepreneurs that aren't really interested in risking it all, right as they're approaching retirement, and are going through a much different emotional experience as they think about what looks appetizing to them as ambitions and initiatives for the year that probably the younger, more growth-minded entrepreneur might not be. But then we've also got clients who are older who are super growth-minded, who can't wait to grow this thing as big as possible because they want the absolute biggest exit, and they're more willing to take risk. So you've got age is going to be one factor that changes how business owners approach different problems. Another thing is going to be where they are in their lives. I'm busy with kids. I've got a lot of stuff going on. Maybe I've got some relationships that are important to me that are not doing so well. Maybe my parents are getting older and their health situation is taken away from my time. Maybe my kids are having issues in school and that's creating something for me, or they've got their own challenges, or maybe my kid's about to be, the number one, violinist in the New York City orchestra, and I've got to focus on what they're doing. And
it's that sandwich generation. You got the kids below you, your parents above you, and you've got to manage health and growing up.
Yeah, and also your personal relationships that you're going through yourself. I think for any time you get past that college and everything else, you've got personal relationships that are starting to change. People are going in different directions. You've got your own relationship with your spouse, assuming you've got one. That sometimes can start to hit friction, especially after kids. You're becoming different people. You're not the same fun-loving, let's just do whatever, YOLO 20-year-olds. You're now dealing with very different responsibilities, and also, just we evolve as people and adapt to different situations. So I think that business owners can find themselves, whether it's related to their age or not, it can also just be related to their personal life and the stability or lack thereof that can cause businesses to stumble. When businesses are young, you said that 10-year, right? Only a third make it past 10. I mean, that's an adolescent at that point. It's got its own, behavioral patterns. It's more difficult. It's starting to, exhibit much more complex tendencies, both around the people who are working there and maybe the good or bad habits that they've created. You've got your own good or bad habits as an entrepreneur. Breaking those habits is really, really tough. And that's something we went through. Mm-hmm. We had built some habits. We had a smaller team. We were used to kind of, playing designated hitter all over the place. And at some point, the team gets to a size where you can't be designated hitter all over the place. You're actually creating confusion. And having the stamina to make it through those tough periods, because it can be frustrating, especially when you're dealing with all those other aspects of life.
Super frustrating.
So, I think that's just something that comes with the territory. When you sign up to be an entrepreneur, you're not signing up for easy. I think nobody tells you, though, what the obstacles you're going to run into are. Anytime you talk to a business, hey, I'm thinking about starting a business. What do you got to tell me? And everyone goes, oh, you're in for something. They don't ever tell you what. And they don't know what, to be honest. They might have some ideas. They can give you some examples. You can read all the books you can. You can listen to all the podcasts that you want to listen to. And they're going to give you more insight. And therefore, when that monster rears its ugly head, you're going to have a little bit more, okay, I heard this happen before, and here's how some people dealt with it. So at least I have some kind of benchmark or roadmap to follow. But most of the time, nobody taps us on the shoulder and says, that's what that was. Remember, you read that book and it said that thing over here? You don't realize it until it's already, got 3 heads and is 50 feet tall. That's when you finally say, oh, that is a monster that I did read about one time in a book. But at first, it's just a problem that happened one day. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I don't have time for that problem. I got these other problems I got to deal with. And they seem like a bigger priority. You don't realize how that thing's growing over there because you close the door and you don't check again for 3 weeks.
And I think that's one of the things that we've found, in just working with people and business owners and trying to get them in the space where they're running their business. I mean, we've done a lot of things like this 5 moves to sell your business like a boss, right? There's a whole bunch of things in here about how to sell your business. But at the end of the day, I think we kind of step back and took what we have learned, experienced ourselves, whether directly or tangentially. And, we, going back to even the comment that you said before, to what age, what's your life circumstance, and really thinking about, well, what's the goal of owning a business for most people? Freedom of time, freedom of money.
Well,
follow a passion.
I'd say freedom of time is probably more of a dream than an actuality. I don't know if being a business owner, you get more control over how you spend your time, but I don't know if you've got freer time. I wouldn't say entrepreneurs in general have more free time than people who are not entrepreneurs. It's
better
just
control.
You got more control. And I think what we can do is we can better overlap what time is personal and what time is business oriented. So we can choose to engage with these people more when we're out socializing, which we all have this much socialized space in our lives. We choose to socialize with people who potentially have some overlap in the networks we're trying to build or the people we're trying to connect with or whatever else. I mean, those are ways that we've tried to optimize how we use our time in our lives. I don't know if every business owner has that same flexibility, but let's just say if you start a restaurant and you don't like being in the kitchen or in the restaurant, you're probably in the wrong business. You got to enjoy being in that space. And if you don't enjoy being in that space, why'd you do it? So.
Yeah, but I think that there's a, and not for every business, but, there's a longevity to being that everything to the business that eventually time kind of catches up with you.
Or size.
And, that was the whole concept of the Exit Ready program that we put together, from the sense of building a business so that this way you're focusing on the things that you love to do, kind of your message before about having all the hats and handing the hats off to different people. So you're really kind of in your your zone. But knowing that you've established a program or systems or a business that allows you the freedom to even just focus on the things that you love. To your point, wet signatures to e-signatures, not in our passion. The line of things that I wake up thinking about, paperwork goes right to the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Processing payroll goes right to the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, and
what goes to the top, that's where I want to spend all my time.
And that's the way it should be. And I think for a lot of business owners, that there are going to be certain aspects of the business that we really enjoy. And let's just use the restaurant, because we all go to restaurants, so we all know that experience. We all go to restaurants where the owner of the restaurant's also the head chef. And you've got the head chefs that are just back there and don't really do a lot of, handshaking and baby kissing. And then you've got chefs that can't wait to come out and ask you how your meal was and engage with you and do that experience. And that's just a different kind of experience. But that chef must love doing that, because if it's not his first year and it's not his second year and he's 3, 4, 5 years in and he still wants to go out and greet customers who are there, dining at his establishment and being a patron, that's an extra level of touch, love, and care that not everyone has. Some people want to own 10 restaurants, but you can't be out in 10 restaurants greeting and shaking hands. So do you instill that in the management staff that you bring in? Do you instill that in the people you decide to bring on? That kind of culture that you're building is a reflection of probably, one, what you think is important for your customer experience, but 2 is also kind of the people you want to engage with. If you're a restaurant owner who loves people who are outgoing and super high I, if you will, on the Colby scale, and want to be socializers and things like that, that's probably because you are. There's not many introverts that want to build businesses that are like that. And on the other hand, if you're an introvert and you just want to run, a very operationally sturdy environment that's focused more on efficiency and getting people in and back out the door, well, then you're going to attract a different kind of person. But then that also means you have to work with a different type of person. So like you were saying, there's the freedom that is offered with business owners. It's not always freedom of time, but you suddenly have the freedom to choose who you want to work with. Whereas you go to a big firm, you kind of have to just deal with the personalities you deal with. If you are working for someone, you have to decide, is that a culture where they're going to bring in the type of people that I want to work with? But you don't get to choose who those people are unless you're in a super high managerial position, or you're given that autonomy and freedom by the business owner who you're working with, which again, that's another cultural aspect. Some business owners micromanage. Some business owners want to create autonomy. I trust my people. I know they're going to do the right thing, so I'm going to let them go be free. And all of these decisions, I think, one, and this is why we did that culture index and want to, understand that more. Who are we as people? Sometimes we think we know, we don't always know. And then also, who do we become when we go to the office? Does that shift? Does that change? How do we complement those things? How do we also just be realistic about what those are? How does that then filter through? And then what kind of waves in the ocean, or what ways can that soothe the waters, is all things that we can be conscious of. One of the problems we all get as business owners is nobody hands us here's the operating manual of how to do this, and here's all the stuff you run into. And being able to understand when you're going to run into those problems and what might be causing them, or what things we should be looking into, that's one of the things that we talk a lot about, which is, hey, how did this go off track? And it's not always clear. And it's not that, oh my God, there was a clear business event like COVID, and that's why I went off track. That's easy to identify. But usually what that is that just exposes the problems that were already there. And maybe a good market cycle or a good environment or a lucky win or a big contract that came in that, you can mask over some of those problems, but it doesn't mean they're not there. It's just newspaper over the spilled milk. The minute that the problem starts to erupt again or something, the growth starts to happen, the mildew that was hiding behind that wall starts to become a problem when you pop the wall open. Now, you have an entire project in hand of remediation and all those other things. And that I think are the things that business owners, you get that freedom, but it doesn't free you from the fact that problems still generate and are created in small pockets. And you can either choose to let them fester, and some of them will just fester and be small and you'll never have to deal with them. Some of them are going to fester and become a real problem. How do you identify that earlier so the problem doesn't, capsize 3 to 6 months of growth? How do you make it where it's, something that can be solved and maybe solved in a constructive way? Maybe it's an opportunity to improve the operation. These are all the things I think that, we wish we could see ahead of time. And that's, when we talk about collaborating with professionals who hopefully can help needle and find those things sooner.
Well, that's kind of the good practice of, we talk about, I guess, two different types of people that typically come. The person who's saying, I want to exit my business and believes that they have something of value. They don't need a long runway. And they're like, come with your magic wand and help. And then there's the other business owner, similar to your situation, where they've kind of had these blinders on and they've had their nose to the ground and they've just plowed through. And all of a sudden they decided one day that they were going to wake up and look around and go, holy shit, it's working. It's working. I'm making money. I've got a program here. I don't want to go backward. Am I doing everything? Because I've been focusing on these elements of the business, the operations of the business. What am I missing outside of this that can really kind of screw me up? And some people wake up and they, are earlier than others, and they get a little bit more inquisitive on how do I start to look for these things. And some people wait too late. And then they expect magic wand to come and help them with the valuation. What do you find is the best course of conversation for uncovering where a business owner's mindset is during their particular cycle or where they are in their phases?
Well, like you said, it's really about asking questions and understanding a little bit more about what was driving them from the start, what's driving them today, and what ultimately is going to drive their future. I think one of the things you mentioned there about exits and biggest businesses, it's insane to me when I talk to a business owner and they say that they don't think they have anything sellable. Like at the end of this experience, it's like, I don't even know if I could sell that. And that is always a thought process that I would challenge. You would send.
It's just as challenging as I have a business that's worth 5 times more than what the market's willing to pay. It's just on a different side of the pendulum,
No, it really is. I think that's the same with every business. You never know if there's a strategic buyer that wants to buy your business. Why? Because they see a vision for it. I think about Alan when he came in and spoke at that Vistage meeting, and he talked about the company that made the paint for the lines in the middle of the road. Mm-hmm. Had to be a specific color, had to be this, had to be that, but it is ultimately a mundane business. And they found a strategic buyer who made concrete, who wanted to get contracts to put in concrete, roadways in this area. And by buying that paint company, they bought the relationships that came with that. That is one of those impactful stories that business owners should think about is, I've got this business. What do I have that's of value? What are the assets? If I actually went estate sale style, like sell all the stuff independently to the people driving past, who's going to find amazing value in that watch where another person might find a lot of value in this vase that my grandmother had? That's the same as a business. Someone's going to find value in your customer base that's going to be greater maybe than you were ever able to extract. Maybe they're going to find some value in the distributor relationships that you have where they can amplify that. And it's worth more than what you think because you never experienced it like that. But be open to the mindset that maybe someone else somewhere has that has a vision for how to use that asset differently, which makes it much more valuable to them. So maybe your business is better being sold piecemeal. Maybe your business is better being sold to a strategic partner. Maybe it is private equity who's going to pay the most for your business. You just never know. And that's why these conversations and why we talk about, don't wait to start talking about exit when you're ready to exit. That's actually the worst time. You're going to be subject to market forces. You're going to be subject to your own preconceived notions of who you want to sell to. And you also, it takes stamina to sell. You're going to deal with a buyer who, if you've ever sold a house, right? This is the experience. I'm going to sell my house. Some real estate agent says, this is what your house is worth. Cool. Some people come in, you got to get out of your house. You got to let them walk all around. Then you come back, place looks like a mess. Okay. You go through this experience and then you accept a bid. You're not done. Then there's the inspection. Then there's the attorneys going back and forth. Then there's this concession. It turns into a much longer bout, which by the end of it, and then you got to move. By the end of it, you're exhausted, you're worn down.
The fatigue is ridiculous.
Right. And that's if you didn't do any housework to your house before you started this process, because usually we all spruce up a little bit if we can. And that's another thing, right? That displaces you. You got to move stuff. You're cleaning stuff out. You're staging your home to get the best value. This is the same experience that you have as a business. You're going to have to go through that. So that's already going to wear your wick down to some point of just, sprucing up the asset, if you will.
Well, if we even stick to that analogy, you could throw paint over something, but that doesn't fix the problem.
No.
And when due diligence comes and it's time to start to get into the heart of the matters, right? We're going to be paying, we're going to be stroking a check. We want to know what's going on, where it's going on, and how it's going on. You can't cover that with paint. That's a full reconstruction job. You're going to have to start taking out walls and fixing stuff.
Well, that's only if it's a poor buyer. You might, if it's an uneducated or unsophisticated buyer, maybe you can get away with it.
Maybe.
Right? Like with a house. But when you sell your house, you get to walk away from it emotionally and the person's going to do whatever they're going to do with it. Often when businesses are sold, there's someone who's tied to it. Either your staff hangs around and helps with it. You've got customers and clients who you care about. Nobody wants to sell their business and get an angry phone call 6 months later from one of their best customers saying, what the heck did you do to me?
Mm-hmm.
And, you've also got a lot of business owners end up staying on for a period of time. There's some transition period that you've got to be there for. So you can paint over it if you want, but you better hope that paint holds up for the period of time you're there, assuming you don't care about any other aspect that's going on. So,
and I'm going to go back to the one example that you had mentioned. There's another example with Adam, when he was going through the process of selling his business, and he wrote a piece of 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. He wrote, "Run your fucking business," because a lot of business owners, they get so enamored with the process of selling, because it's exciting to talk about what you're gonna get out of your business, and somebody wants to buy you, and now all of a sudden you're like the prettiest girl at the ball, and you're getting offers, and this is before you even go through the due diligence, but you're excited to sell. You've got these opportunities, and you take your eye off the ball. Yeah.
And it's because it's exciting, it's new, and it's challenging. So it's occupying a portion of your brain. And it's, like anything, if you can watch the ball and sit and dribble, you will rarely miss. But if you're trying to look across the court and figure out where everyone is, and you're trying to block off a defender at the same time, it's not as easy to make sure that you're keeping the ball where you want it. So that's another thing to your point. You're selling a business. It's taking up mind space from operating your business. And one of the biggest concerns that I would express to business owners who don't create a program to build up into the process then of selling their business is how distracting that whole process ends up being. And you don't want to end up putting in 3 to 6 months of effort of going through due diligence and people asking questions and going back and forth, and you're learning new concept as you're going while you're making maybe the most important and largest financial transaction of your life. While you're going through that, you've also got to run your business. So You better hope no problems arise during that time, which, cross your fingers, good luck. So these are all things that we would say, make sure you're ready to deal with the bumps in the road, tariff policy changes, COVID. How many things have we seen in the last 5 years? Just in
a lot
in this period where it's, every year arguably is a little bit different.
Well, the other thing that gets frustrating is you think about these people who, I go back to something that an attorney once said at a networking meeting that we were having, and the way that they phrased it was, you can either pay me a lot of money to solve a solution, to come to a solution for one of your issues, or help you set something up, or you can pay me a shit ton later to fix the problems that you didn't address at first.
Mm-hmm.
And your business is kind of the same thing. You can either pay the money along the way, or when it's time to sell, you're going to have to pay a tremendous amount of money to fix it. And then you get no real rate of return. Like, at least if you do things along the way, you then start to see some of the benefits that brings in just your general, how you run your business, the operations, your revenue generation, whatever it might be, that you push off because you don't want to spend the money and you're penny wise, pound foolish. And then when you go through the process at the end to clean everything up, it's like, so this is what it's supposed to feel like.
Yeah. No, and again, I think just going back to that bandwidth thing, because even when we talk about business owners and their choice to exit or whatever else, it so much has to do with bandwidth. If you have the bandwidth, the energy, and everything else, and I saw this recently with my own father and the business that he most recently started with, businesses take blood, sweat, and bone marrow from you, like directly. And depending on what stage they're at, it's taking more or less. And the more challenges you run into in early years, the harder it's going to be successful over the long term. I mean, maybe you have the grit and stamina to get through, and maybe those are scars, battle scars that make you tougher and stronger. But for most business owners, those early scars can crush the business and cause you to move on and try something new. And that is one of those things, as you get closer and closer to exit, it probably means your stamina is either winding down or the market is demanding highest rate of return. If you want to assume you're getting the highest rate and you're just going to sell in a really good market, similar with the home, you're selling in a good market, throw no paint on anything. Leave your kids' toys hanging out around the like nobody cares. They're going to come in, they're going to bid through your offer because it's a great market to be a seller. Sometimes you get lucky and land in those environments, and you may sell at a time which you want to or don't want to. But that's another reason why we would say, be ready. Be ready, because you never know what's the best market. Why not take the best price? Just because you're happy with the number doesn't mean you shouldn't want the best price. And those little changes you're going to make it the highest value also should be accretive towards your business generally. It should have some rate of return, like you just said, if some buyer is going to pay more for it. I mean, that usually should be the input-output. And leaving yourself ready to deal with whatever opposition you're going to deal with from the buyer themselves, because they'll sometimes go 60% of the way and suddenly create a ton of problems because they know you've already put in a bunch of time and energy.
And now they're just trying to wear you down.
You're softer.
Yeah.
Your guard's not all the way up. You already opened up all your numbers. The kimono's fully open. And now they're going to sit and start ridiculing, the parts that they don't like. So business owners have to be kind of ready for it, like it's a competition.
No, and part of that exit ready mentality is also being prepared for when that day does come and you do hand the keys over, that you're doing it without regret, understanding what your further purpose is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because that's what holds up a lot of people as well. They think about the idea of selling, but they really don't know what the hell they do if they sell. They don't know what their life is going to look like. And, health, time, life is a fickle thing. It doesn't give us much direction in terms of what's going to happen tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And being prepared for that, and having the mindset of your business being prepared for that, of what you're going to do when you're done. What is the next venture? What is the next step? What is your act 2 is huge.
Yeah, it's, there's been a lot written on this about 5 stages of post-retirement or things like that, it's especially harder for a business owner, I think, because for a guy who goes and does his job and then comes home and can focus on the things he wants to focus on, one of the differences in the entrepreneurs, you kind of never put it down. You're going to bed at night, you're thinking about something somewhere in the business, whether it's how do I juggle my schedule the next day so I can make sure I can do all these things, or, it is just constantly taking up time. It's like being a parent versus not being a parent. The minute you're a parent, part of your brain is going to be occupied by worrying about your kids, wondering about what's going on with your kids, where your kid's going to be. Like, that doesn't exist before you have kids. Mm-hmm. You get that nice freedom space in your brain to, have a hobby or do something over there. Entrepreneur, same thing. Suddenly it's part of your brain sucked up with this thing. And that makes it especially difficult to exit and move on to that next stage, because it's not just the time of work that goes away. It's that part of the brain that, is occupied by just worrying about this other child, which is your company. Mm-hmm. And once you're free of that, which I don't think anyone really frees of it as much as they like to think they do when they sign that paperwork and get that check. But what do you do with that? I mean, eventually that space will open up. Eventually, at some point, you've moved on from owning that thing. Same with if you buy a house, right? You buy a house at first, anytime you're in the neighborhood, you drive by. What have they done? What are they doing? And, after a while, you drive by and you don't care. Like, it's not my house anymore. It wasn't my house 10 years ago.
So I think we're in a unique position. Thinking about business owners the way that we do, it's almost like people say to me, explain to me how financial advisory and your conversation with business owners, you guys business consultants, like what is it that you do? And I think people forget that investing in companies is just understanding businesses that are obviously at a different value. Same problems they started with, their problems are similar, just at bigger scale. We run our own businesses. How would you answer to somebody who says, like, what's the dynamic working with the business owners, investing their money, doing the financial planning? Like, how do you guys see yourself as being unique? How would you direct that conversation?
Well, I think one of the biggest differences that you and I have, and one of the things that can set us apart, is the fact that not only are we business owners, which not every person who walks around with our job title is owning their business the same way we do. We also grew up in families that owned their business. So we saw it from a couple different angles, and now our business focusing on business owners, we see it from even more angles. So I think there's a difference between knowing things because you read them in a textbook and then living things almost your entire life. That is a very different kind of experience. If you go to a restaurant, it's like, oh yeah, I watch some recipes and so I cook some stuff and here it is, versus someone who has grown up in the kitchen of a Michelin star restaurant their entire life. And from the time they were 6, we're sitting there chopping vegetables to now, are running the place. That's someone that I have a little bit more confidence in is going to be able to give me insight directly to what I'm dealing with. And I wish I had an easy way to kind of say, and here's why, here's the breakdown, and here's the reverse engineer, and here's how I could recreate you and I. But I actually think it's a little bit complex because of how many skill sets and things need to kind of line up to not only have the competency, but then also to be able to work with and collaborate not only with the business owners themselves, but also the other professionals that they value in their world. We can sometimes run into some challenging personality types. And if we've got a business owner who, he's successful because very type A, very this, right? Normally high type A is,
It's amazing how much more understanding of people and how they operate is important to what we do. Just like issue spotting is super important versus actually having the solutions, than mostly anything.
Yeah, well, usually, people who are good problem solvers and good business owners, and usually as a business owner, you have to be a problem solver. And like you said, they don't necessarily need help solving the problem. Sometimes they just need help, like someone pointing and saying, that's a problem. And maybe they don't realize how big of a problem. Maybe they didn't even see it. It's like, oh, I didn't even realize that was a problem. Or maybe they just haven't attached it to what their goals are. So, as you said, if you're keeping your head down and you're just worried about, I want to maintain these clients, or I want to maintain this, or I want to beat my sales from the last quarter. And, you have these easy, kind of very simple checkpoint benchmarky goals. They're not tied to a longer goal, which might be, well, how do you ultimately want to transition out of your business? And I think about my father-in-law who owned a law practice, and his goal his entire life was, I want to give it to my kids. Here's the problem.
No lawyers.
Kids didn't want to be attorneys. So, you run into that issue, and he almost, up until the day he died, I think he did not accept that was the outcome. It's like for him, there was no other discussion to be had. And I wish we had had more time to talk about it, because we started talking about, well, you need to find new attorneys who can come in, do the job, and you can just, be the guy who's cultivated and built all these relationships with centers of influence and people who ultimately feed you business. And then, you don't need to be the one doing the work. And that was something we started doing. And unfortunately, he passed early. So we didn't have the opportunity to really see that play out. But again, that's a conversation he probably should have been having for a long time. Mm-hmm. And that's a situation where there were people talking in his ear about why he shouldn't do that. And sometimes you need people to challenge some of your preconceived notions that you have, because, things that made us successful in the first stage of our business don't always make us successful in stage 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the exit stage is very different than the start phase. So you might be great at starting businesses. You may not be good at exiting businesses. You may be terrible at starting businesses, but you may be really good at exiting businesses. We're not all good at all stages just because we were good at one stage. And I think we all have to have the humility to understand that. And we also have to have the willingness to hear people out and explain to us why we're not perfect. And unfortunately, when you're a business owner, you end up probably, if you don't want to hear the negatives, your staff will recognize that. And your spouse and other people, they may recognize that they don't want to hear how they're not good at organizing their calendar. And so everyone will just be like, no, you're great at organizing your calendar. No, you're fantastic. And then they'll just be a crutch.
I remember one of the things early on, as I got into this business, I never had the sales training or the sales experience until I
still don't.
Well, yeah, everything I had to was either self-taught or going and finding coaches, but before that all happened, I remember my trial and error periods to where things didn't work, certain things did work, and I started to build up these preconceived notions like, you don't know my business. So we would be someplace and I'd be listening to somebody and they would say, you should try to do this in your business. I'm like, you don't know my business. I tried it already. It doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And I remember being in a meeting with people who were all more successful than I was at that point. And I forced myself to say, while you think that nobody understands your business, you are going to take 5 good ideas of what they're doing in their business and try to figure out how their good ideas relate to them. How can you make them relate to you? And that was a fucking exercise.
That's a great exercise.
It was a really, really tough exercise. And that was a pivotal moment in my career when I started to not think so much of being narrow-minded of you just don't know my business. But that took a lot of work for me to get out of that and to self-identify. And there are so many people who they live with those preconceived notions. They don't expand beyond it.
Yeah. And I think for some of us, we have preconceived notions that are also comfortable notions. Like, I don't want to do that, so therefore it doesn't work. And I had someone ask me the other day about cold calling. And they were like, oh, you don't cold call, right, anymore, Jordan? Anymore. And I was like, I never did. Like, I did when I was in college and I had an internship. I never liked that job. That was always something that I'd rather not do. Now, would I tell people it doesn't work? It doesn't not work. Is it a great use of time? Is it a great way to do things if you're going into this business? I can think of better. So if it's the only thing you can think of, then heck, go for it. I think every business owner should look at everything that is at least wise or has some level of sage adviceness to it as potentially being applicable to their business. Is it worth the implementation cost? Is it a priority? Is it those things? You kind of put it on that list, and if it's priority 0, then maybe it never actually gets to implementation phase. But it's not something not to consider. I mean, we looked at things that are I would almost call it version 2 of cold calling, like Smart Asset, and having other people reach out and find leads and then direct them over. And that just saved you the time of dialing the phone, but you still had to then answer the phone and talk to someone who you had no relationship with, had no idea who they were talking to. And we ultimately, it wasn't that we didn't find some success there. We just didn't really find it to be all that useful, but we still keep it somewhere in the back pocket of like, maybe for, young people, if they're looking for something to learn from and have as an experience, it might make sense. And that I think is something we've always been very good at, which maybe we take a bit for granted, is we don't look at any idea and throw it out at face value. We kind of always want to turn it around a little bit and be like, oh, how might that be valuable? How might that someday play a part? Or maybe version 1 sucks, but version 5 will be awesome. And so let's think about that, but maybe in a year or two, and kick it down the pike. And I think business owners need to be thoughtful about that. I mean, Chamber of Commerce is a good example. Is Chamber of Commerce good for new businesses in a new area? They're great. Usually that's a way to kind of meet the movers and shakers of the area and find out where you should put your time. Is it great for everyone at any moment in time? Maybe. Don't know. Got to feel it out a little bit more, but it's something you can kind of leave there as an option to explore. And when you run out of ideas, that sometimes is a place to check out. That's for people who don't have consultants or other professionals who they want to hire. I mean, normally if you think that, hey, I'm having trouble with sales, you can go experiment with all the stuff you find on a quick internet search or a ChatGPT discussion. Or you can go hire a sales coach and say, here are the problems I'm running into. Here's what ChatGPT said. What do you agree with? What don't you like? And how can you play a part in this where I can find a budget and experience that I'm looking for that makes sense? And that shows you're an educated person as you walk in the door.
And I think with that, that open-mindedness, and you just think about how we draw our planning into running the business, right? We may come with a whole bunch of solutions, a whole bunch of ideas, the tools that we have in our toolbox, we can whip them out. I think most of the time business owners do a really good job, at least the successful ones that end up at our doorstep do a really good job at that. But where we can start to identify things is quantifying how much money you can put toward that, where you should be drawing liquidity from, how you should tax manage around certain things, how when you start establishing new assets or new ideas, do you insulate them from your other parts of your business? How do you change focus to the next stage if you're in a growth stage and you're like, okay, this is how we've always done it, but I feel like we might need to do things differently. What are the next greatest ideas? That's when it gets super exciting. When people are not only open-minded, but they start to think about the bigger picture and like, okay, how do I maximize my output here? How do I make the engine run in just complete harmony so that this way I'm getting the full experience?
Well, I think also you and I kind of like living vicariously through some of these business owners, and it's like, oh, that's a cool business. Like he's got a cool thing going. And so for us, I think it gives us an opportunity because we're both growth mindset people. And that's often, I think, the biggest problem that business owners, as they hit a certain stage of success, they run into the problem of maintaining that growth mindset. So for us, we see something, they're thinking about all the risks associated. We're seeing like, there's a lot of opportunity here. This thing's so cool. If we had this is what we'd be doing. And I think giving some of those ideas and also, bringing a good and positive energy to it is important. And then knowing we can't do some of those things. Here's who needs to be in the room to help get you where you need to get. And we are, comfortable in our own skin. So we're never trying to be all things to all people. We recognize this is the part of the car that we work on, and someone else is going to fix your brakes, and someone else is going to handle your tires and paint, and someone else is going to, detail your interior. Like we understand what our role is, and we're never trying to overstep into those places.
Right. But we did notice there are a couple of chips on the paint. Your brake pads are running a little low, and these fluids should probably be swapped out and changed. We're not the guys to do that, is what you're saying.
Yeah. And these guys, by the way, might be the guys to do it. We're not 100% sure, but, this at least starts the conversation. And there's just a lot of moving parts in these things. And especially when you're trying to run, there's a difference between trying to keep a Toyota Corolla with, 250,000 miles on the road versus trying to run an F1 car and, have it go around the track faster than all the other F1 cars. Just look at the service requirements that those two vehicles have. So depending on how hard and fast you want to run your company, for some people, they're not trying to.
No.
I have friends who, have spouses who run, small businesses that are mainly more to make a little bit of bucks, get a write-off and, enjoy themselves. And it's almost hobby. And then you've got people who, they're trying to beat their competitors. Like those guys right there. I want to take them down. And neither of them are wrong or right. But
most of the people even in between that are looking for some way to insulate themselves, bulletproof themselves, set their business up so they're not headed into failure when one of these cyclical market cycles start to change and they're in a new cyclical rotation, or something happens in the environment that sets them back. They don't feel like they're poised for failure.
I'll take it a step further though, because you use the failure word, which is the fear that we all kind of live with. I think there's a bigger thing that every business owner should think about, which is how good could it be? We've seen business owners who feel tied to their business, who are, kind of struggling every day, are stressed to the gills, cortisol levels, through the roof. Mm-hmm. And then we've seen other guys who are,
cool as a cucumber.
Right. And it's like, I got someone to deal with that. Like a problem happens. Someone's going to take care of that. Like, we're good. Actually, I don't even have to answer this call. Like, that's how good we are. Like, I know what's up. And I think that some business owners have not envisioned life can be great owning a business. It doesn't have to be turmoil and, blood and bone marrow, like spewed out on the ground in an attempt to, continue to grow that 1% more or something like that. It actually at some point can become a snowballing mechanism that just gets bigger because gravity is just pulling it down and it's just taking more as it goes. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where, when we first start working with a business owner, we want to get them there. And some people are at different stages with that. And that we've talked about, how do we scale that? How do we market and give people that concept in some visualized way where they can see what the progress is? Because there's no easy scale, right? Where you can walk on and say, oh, look, I lost 10 pounds in 6 months. Like, good for me. Business owners don't have an easy measurement scale like that. So how do we make something that's meaningful, but also simple to understand, where it feels like stepping on a scale and seeing the improvement or the goal that you're looking for? And that, I think, is the thing that people should look more. It's not just about how do I keep my business alive? It's how do I help my business thrive? And that's a very different place. Like alive, not failing, versus COVID or something like that happens. And actually, like for us, that amplifies our business because we are better structured and suited for these problems. And half the people who are out there, they're not ready. They're not even close to ready. They're barely ready to deal with every day, let alone a real problem.
Well, and they're definitely not ready to pivot, because when those events happen, or they're really more opportunities disguised as
tragedies.
Tragedies.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to find where the opportunity is. And to your point, that takes a little bit of a free up of your mind. And if you can't free up your mind because you're so in the business, well, it's going to be hard to catch up.
Yeah, it's also that SWOT analysis. I mean, how many companies have redesigned how they do their production and distribution because of tariffs and everything, supply chain issues? Like, people had to be a little bit more flexible where they source their goods from. If you're, because it's easy for us. We're an asset light kind of business. So for us, we have a little bit more flexibility with how we change and pivot.
We're an asset. That's true. There is a lot more flexibility. But even if you look at just the typical, the guy who doesn't have to answer his phone, if you just translate that over to the advisory business, how many of those guys were in diversified portfolios and were like shitting a brick, not picking up their phone even when the markets were going down because they didn't want to deal with how to answer it and they figured it'll just go away. Versus us, who diversification's lazy asset management. Let's start rotating. Let's start shifting. Let's finding opportunities. Get rid of the things that aren't going to rebound faster. Jump onto the things that, to use your phraseology, take the stairs, take the elevator down and the escalator up. No,
stairs down,
elevator up. I know. Try to take your words, but it was really buy the things that aren't going to. You're already impacted. You're already down. So let's chop off the things that we don't think are going to come back up and jump into the things that are going to rebound a lot faster than being well diversified. And I think that having that mindset in your own business, it's not just a stock market mentality. It's a business mentality. What are the things that aren't working that are dragging us down? What are the things that aren't giving us the rate of return that we're expecting out of our new business that's going to come out of this thing? And that's where opportunity lies.
Yeah. And somewhere in between that is, there's pivoting too often versus pivoting at the correct pace. And that's another thing which, they try to teach that in business school, but, until you go out there, you experience it with your own business and understand what's the right process of change, shift, and what's too much change where nobody recognizes your business anymore versus what's not enough change where nobody really sees any of the impact of what you're doing different or anything else. Where do you not violate your core values and where do you keep true to those while also keeping yourself able to adapt, evolve, and make changes? It is, let's just say we're never going to run out of content on that topic because it's constantly changing, it's constantly evolving, and every business is a little bit different. And every business owner who deals with that business is going to be a little bit different. Larry Ellison is, in the technology space, but I guarantee you that him and Sam Altman don't look at how to grow this piece of the AI picture exactly the same. Their views are not going to be exactly aligned. And they're two of the most successful people in that space. But, one flies fighter jets and the other one, graduated college only, 10 years ago. So it's very, I mean, look, I think it's one of the coolest sports to watch is business, more so than, and I'm thrilled that we have so much media to be able to consume it with nowadays. I really feel like CEOs used to be kind of hidden behind the curtain of some of these larger companies, and we get to see it now very much out in the open. And probably the one who's most guilty of that is Elon Musk. And, maybe that's a little bit too much exposure, but it is interesting and it creates personalities along with companies. And I've seen the way it's shifted investor mindsets and how they want to be invested and who they want to be invested with. And does that person, do they connect to that person or their mission or what their core values are? Or do they totally not? And it makes them want nothing to do with that company. And it's very interesting. And I feel the same way with small businesses. And that's true when you're trying to hire. People are either going to come in and be like, yeah, I want to be part of this, because that business owner, the CEO, that person drives a lot of what that company ends up being. And we saw in that one event we went to over in Cleveland, we saw an example of a business owner and a management team that were not in alignment. A great fit.
No.
And, it's okay. They've got a problem. How do you make the changes? How do you make the appropriate changes to get that on the right track? Because they had a great business.
Well, and the one thing that they had going for them was some self-realization of who had what strengths and what weaknesses, and what tendencies. So while it drove them crazy, they had something to come back to and point to say this is where we fall in the how we make decisions, why we make decisions certain ways, how we look at the business, how we handle the business, which I don't think a lot of people take the time to go through that process as well.
Well, that I think is one of the most, if I could give a very quick shot in the arm of advice that is almost always going to be right for any business or any business owner, is don't be afraid to talk to professionals, to hear about ways in what they're doing might be able to amplify or better your business. This isn't necessarily even for us, but that culture index, being able to go in and just take a peek. Can this help me understand my business better? What's the commitment level? What's the, just a free sample versus the I'm going all in and I'm adopting it fully? When we think about the entrepreneurial operating system, EOS, what's the risk of having a couple conversations to understand how maybe that might be something that makes sense? What is the risk of talking to another professionals who someone recommends and says, hey, I think they can have a big impact on your business? Why wouldn't you take that meeting? What is going to happen? Do you think that you will lose your consciousness and suddenly agree to something that is ultimately not in your best interest? More likely, you're going to find that there's an opportunity out there that you haven't uncovered, or some piece that you're not optimizing yet that maybe takes you from just survival to thrive. And that, I think, is where every business owner, if you're worried about survival, are you a little bit too worried? Are you correctly assessing the risk and sustainability of the business you're managing? Or are you not taking enough of a look at thrive? And even those with, I want to thrive, are you positioned to grow? Do you have that mindset? Do you have the liquidity? Can you weather the storm if things get in your way on your mission and path? Understanding what that all means and when you're in a good situation or a bad situation is something that I think everyone needs to kind of take a second and say, more conversations will help me address that with good professionals, with meaningful people. That's going to ultimately better arm me for dealing with those situations when they arise and getting to where I want to be.
What's amazing is even just a little pivot, just a little change, just a little adjustment to somebody who's successful has really great impact, dollar impact. It's not, it doesn't have to be something that flips them upside down and shakes them up and reorganizes them and then says, here, this is what you need to do. Sometimes it's just little slight movement that really changes the needle in a big way. So listen, we're on 10 years, top third of businesses out there. Mascia Capital Group, 45 years. Our goal is to help 1,000 business owners by 2036 be exit ready for their business. What excites you most about the next 5 years, 10 years?
I think, to me, the most exciting thing about this business and the best part about this business are the people and the stories that you run into along the way. I'll pull out the book. Just came out, just published, signed even. But this is a really cool thing that you did here, is writing about your experience, about your family's experience, about your personal experience and what going through in businesses. And this to me is one of the coolest things that I get to do in my job is, jump in shotgun and kind of, take the ride with people, even if it's only for, short stints down the highway, and be able to tell them like, hey, actually there's a faster route over here. Or, yeah, no, actually now's a good time to, flip out to the sports slick tires because weather's clear and it's a good time to, hit the gas and see if we can pull ahead. So that to me is always the best experience, the personal relationships that I get the privilege of, being a part of during that experience. That's the coolest part for me of what makes me wake up every day and want to do what I do. It's being able to experience in a very, very real way. And we have pretty close relationships with our clients. I mean, I think that, I consider them all friends and
compliance approved text message type of relationship.
Exactly. And so that's really cool. But when I just look at them and I think about the experience that they're going to have over the next 5 years and ourselves over the next 5 years, obviously artificial intelligence is one of those things that's in the media, everyone's talking about. And I do think that regardless of how much tangible benefit is going to be felt in different parts of the business, I think that people's imaginations are probably stronger than what realities are going to be in certain aspects there, but it's still going to be transformational. And it might even just be transformational in how we experience it. When you look at the last 5 years that we've had, some of the most transformational advancements that we've had in the way that we conduct our business is Zoom and e-signature. Boring, very boring, but it changes the way that we can connect with clients. And it changes the way that we can get stuff done that normally is both a pain in our and our clients able to move forward. Having to wait to get some paperwork done and having to get, ship something out and have it signed, or go to their house and have it signed, or have them come in and have it signed, that can push back things a week. And that's a big drag when you multiply that by the number of clients that we work with. Being able to e-sign and have it done that afternoon, bing, bang, boom, that's a much, much easier process for all parties involved. And Zoom's just more intimate than a phone call. That's just it. And for some people, they are happier with Zoom because save on travel, save on this. We can meet up face-to-face this many times. And in between, we can Zoom and we can have more productive and more constructive conversations in between those personal meetups. And I just feel like we get more done and the connection is better as a result. So looking forward, while AI, it might not suddenly transform every aspect of what we do, but I do think that it can make a mundane task suddenly a little bit more fun and interesting. It can turn something that used to take 30 minutes into something that takes 10, which just makes it more enjoyable and less of a pain. And there's all other ways that it's going to amplify things that we haven't even figured out yet, or maybe haven't had a chance to implement yet. So hearing about the ways that business owners are doing that and getting advantages and finding new ways to do things, or ways that re-energize them on a task that used to be not so fun, but now is kind of cool. I mean, I have to write, a letter to a board to make a request for something. This used to be the bane of my existence. Like the minute you were like, hey, can you write this letter to the board? I would almost have a temper tantrum like my 3-year-old.
Yeah.
And now it's like, I can't wait to see what this thing comes up with. And I would have it be like, oh, tell a story while you're at it, just to see how ridiculous, AI would come up with some suggestion. And of course, you're always, the owner of the product that you send out. So, but it just gives me a new fun way that's interactive to do something that used to feel mundane.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that, just hearing how people are experiencing that and being able to take advantage of that technology is going to be really, really exciting. And I think any business owner that isn't looking at this technology as how exciting could this make different parts of my business, that's somewhere you should spend some time. I mean, that's a good 2026 initiative.
Well, we even talk about just the fact that, 2030, every baby boomer is going to be over the age of 65. But at the same time, this other tide is coming in, which is AI is set to reach singularity, which that clock has already moved up from 2030. And that was only 12 months ago. So AI is obviously going to have a huge impact on how people run their businesses, how people do day-to-day activities, how even businesses are going to maintain or experience valuation changes. From a business owner perspective, that's super impactful, but I think it also weighs into our investment philosophy. And I'd love for you to just talk about the market from an investment philosophy and looking forward at AI and the publicly traded companies that we invest in.
Well, so far, it feels like the market has kind of focused on infrastructure first. So NVIDIA, and software providers, those have been at the forefront of investors' minds, and probably rightfully so. That's where the most excitement and maybe some of the greatest perceived gap initially was between current value versus future potential value. And that's always something to keep in mind, is every company kind of has a couple different values. You've got the fundamental cash flow discounted, what is the number that it is worth? If we were to sit down and have a bunch of finance students in a room, give them the fundamentals, and they can all come up with the same answer, which can either be graded correct or incorrect on the test. Every company can have that value. Then usually there's a terminal value that we add on to that, which is, all right, well, into perpetuity, now this business isn't really growing. It's just a cash flow generator or something like that. What's that worth? And that can also change based on, does that company have a moat or anything else? So there's all these different ways that there used to be to, analyze and value a boring company. And that gap of difference is going to be relatively tight. And then you have, oh, well, what if there's this huge growth opportunity out there and we don't really know what it's going to be or what it's going to be worth, and it's a little left to interpretation. Well, now that gap in value suddenly becomes this. Because if that happens, great. And if that doesn't happen, well, then it's still back down to old boring company. And AI, the initial thought process that the investor landscape had was, well, these are the companies that are going to benefit that. OpenAI is going to go from $20 a month to $2,000 a month once people really see what value it brings. And maybe, we'll see. There's a lot of competition there. And NVIDIA, certainly with the supply-demand, issue that they were dealing with, where the demand was super high and the supply was still limited, that is another place where people easily were able to draw that gap of what the growth opportunity set was. I think as we move forward, there's going to be greater appreciation to how the impact of AI on productivity is going to trickle down to almost every industry. So we've already seen that people have recognized there's a power consumption issue with artificial intelligence. So now suddenly utilities have become hot again because, there's clearly an energy demand gap here, and it's not going to be able to be filled in time. So energy prices are ultimately going to go up. And that's one of our theses around this year and what might happen. And I don't think we're unique in that mindset. So people are starting to move from the software and direct infrastructure to some of the greater infrastructure pieces which need to be in place before companies really start to see the productivity, margin expansion, and earnings gain that they may get from this new technology.
So what's really interesting about that is if you can kind of draw a parallel to just even Main Street businesses to your AI, is the fact that, we're looking at the same thing in your business as we're looking at in Wall Street, right?
Correct.
You've got a certain value based upon the cash flow that you've created or whatever way your industry is valued. But when we talked about some strategic acquirers, are you looking for people who are going to value your business in a different way because of future growth that they see by acquiring your particular business? As we start to look at just the, beyond AI, the general philosophy, the investment philosophy that we implore for business owners, because it's a little bit different, right? Same, but different, but still the same. What are some of the conversations that you're having with business owner clients that might be a little bit different in terms of how do we bring value on the investment side, other than investing in AI?
Well, I think one of the important things to understand anytime you're looking at an investment is they all have characteristics, just like any animal in the wild. You've got things that move fast but are unpredictable and, aren't very nice to pet. And then you've got things that are very trustworthy, slow moving, and, safe for your children. And that's true with investing as well. You've got, when you look at investments, you've got liquidity profiles. Liquidity is a very important factor and is often not properly appreciated within the risk spectrum. we think about risk. You ask most people, what is risk in
or
investments?
deployed, right? Because most people go liquidity. Well, I've got X amount of dollars in my savings account.
Correct. And that's going to give you a certain level of return and a certain level of
accessibility,
but also even predictability, because you've got predictability. Let's say you buy a 3-month CD. You have predictability for 3 months, but you don't have predictability past 3 months because you don't know what's going to happen in that 3 months. It might be a lower rate of return. It might, be something you can't reinvest in or whatever else. So liquidity is an important risk factor to understand. Risk is not just things going up and down. That is volatility, which is a type of risk. So understanding the different components of risk and how they relate to not only your personal situation, but if you're a business owner, you've got a more complex personal situation. And sometimes you may need to be able to fund the business. It's important to know, what that exposure might be or predictably be. You may have inconsistency in your cash flow where, if you're growing your business and you might need to reinvest in something, that might cause a moment of lower inflow for yourself. So you need access to things there. And then I think we have some other things, which are what are the return profiles that you're looking for. So you can own things that are liquid that don't have, the same consistency as certain liquid investments or the traditional liquid investments, which is cash, T-bills, or things that are, short maturity based money markets. But you can have something that, I would almost say is like money market plus. And things that are very liquid offer a higher rate of return, have some volatility in there, but it's something that maybe meets the needs because you don't need this cash for a known expense that's coming up.
Mm-hmm.
You need this cash for a maybe expense that might be coming up. You've got a couple different resources that you can pull from. So we want to keep a layer of liquidity here, but maybe we can offer a rate of return, which is going to add significantly to what your ultimate return is, or this is something that, can feed in another way. There's also different ways that you can consume your returns. And this is something else that I think business owners need to think about, not only as they own businesses, but also after you own a business, which is normally we have cash flow coming in from our business. We want to replicate that cash flow. So the highest rate of return that you can normally get on the risk spectrum is normally considered equities. You've got money market and low rate of return things, and you've got fixed income kind of running on this scale to the point that you meet with equities, which are highest rate of return, but also highest volatility. There are things in the mix in there which can potentially create the consistency of the cash flow you had, but also gain access to those higher equity-like rates of return. And one of the things that I think is underrated in this industry, which has gone so focused on the argument between active and passive, which if you ask most people about what do they think investment philosophy based, it's basically I either love John Bogle or I don't. I believe in passive index investing or I believe in active investing. That is such a first level conversation versus the conversations that experienced professionals are going to have.
Well, people also misquote Warren Buffett.
Correct.
When Warren Buffett says, if you're not an experienced investor, then just invest in the S&P 500.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not his answer of go invest in the S&P 500. It's
right.
He caveat of, right, he doesn't.
Yeah.
What 5 holdings are a majority of what his wealth was made out of over time. So, I think that there's also not only the Bogle analogy, but also the people who misconstrue other professionals that are out there and the advice that they've given.
Well, I mean, it's like anyone who reads one, article and suddenly wants to claim that they've got proficiency on a subject matter. It's easy nowadays to gain access to information, especially with, just running into ChatGPT and ask it a bunch of questions. But even when people ask me, they'll say, hey, I use ChatGPT to, source some companies to invest in. And I ask it to do this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, well, what methodology does it use? And they'll be like, what do you mean methodology? I told it to do this, that, and the other thing. It's like, yeah. But if you're asking it to screen for certain stocks and you don't put in what method you want it to use or what basis it wants to use first, or, follow the value line method or the Morningstar method of running through stocks or pick those. If you don't create some consistency there, then you're going to just get random answers coming back in, and there's no way to ever really understand what variables moving it one way or the other. And this is part of just like the scientific process in its own way. But investing and finding different avenues is not just finding the stock that's going to perform the best. That's one aspect of activity that's being done. But that would be like cleaning your house just means taking out your vacuum and running it over the carpet a couple times and boom, house is clean. It's clearly not, right? I mean, the vacuum ain't going to help you with the toilet. So if you want to go in and do the process correctly, you kind of want to see what all the different instruments you can use are and understand what the newest investment options are, which ones are good, which ones are bad. Nowadays, I see a lot of push towards whether it be cryptocurrency or private equity or investments in private industry and investments.
Right,
That's a big push. And I don't think that people really understand a lot of the risks that come into that. We talked about the liquidity as number one and volatility as another piece. And both of those have very different profiles from most of the other investments that are floating out there.
Well, and for those, everybody talks about them when they're on their way up.
Yes.
They don't like to talk about when you should have your exit strategy for them. Right. So,
well, and what's also a healthy investment strategy for something that exhibits that dynamic? Because just because something's volatile doesn't mean it's a bad investment. Actually, that might make it a great investment, but it also means you have to approach it a little bit differently. Similar with, and me and my analogies, I sometimes refer these things as if they're different animals or different phylums. You're going to treat a snake a little bit differently than you're going to treat a mouse. And it doesn't make the snake better than the mouse. I mean, I guess on the predatory hierarchy, the snake beats mouse, but you wouldn't necessarily say snake beats honey badger. So when you find the same kind of animal, they still may behave a little bit differently. And there might be one strategy that works for that. And that's the other problem that I always see is people assume one strategy works for all assets. Not exactly. And maybe there's ones where there's good practice in it. Like if you were to play any sport and you were to be like, hey, what's a good idea? I don't know, practice regularly. That's going to be a pretty good prescription no matter what the sport is. And that's kind of true with investing and trading. But again, if you're going to do like sprint practices, but you're ultimately doing a sport that doesn't require a lot of sprinting, that may not be where your time is best spent. And so investing is much, I think doesn't need to be completely complicated, but you have to have the understanding and have mastered certain aspects in it to then break it down to that simple way of how do I deploy this in a way that it's accretive, makes sense, and promotes what I'm trying to accomplish. That actually is a lot more complicated than the nerd article, nerd wallet article, or some other quick diatribe that you jump into and decide to hit your wagon to very quickly. I think just having a conversation, understanding like what should I watch out for, what are the pitfalls, that's not a bad way to do it. And when business owners, especially because they're so used to being competent, being risk takers, having the understanding how that investment can offset all the risk you're taking in your business, how you should think about those different aspects and what liquidity profiles are either appropriate for you or not, what investments are appropriate or not, and what way your emotional or preconceived notions are clouding the other opportunities which might be out there. That's all stuff that it's not that easy.
No, and I think that you mix you put into the mix the experience, because we also know that I would say the biggest impediment for do-it-yourselfers is being invested, and the biggest impediment for investors is staying invested. And the behaviors that it takes to stay invested. And when you're rotating in and out, because we hear it all the time, right? Market's going up, people go, it's going to go lower. Goes up higher. It's going to go, it's got to break at some point, goes higher. Man, this thing just doesn't want to stop. It's got to go down at some point, goes higher. You know what? I can't watch this anymore. I got to be involved. I got FOMO. I'm going to jump in. I jump in, it goes lower. The market's I never make money in the market.
Yeah.
Right. And then when they go down, it's, they'll come back up. They've been going up. They'll come back up. Then they go down further. And then what's going on? I thought they were going to go back up, and it goes down further. And you go, this is bullshit. I'm out. I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
I never make money in the market.
Well, it's almost the same. And I was actually just having this conversation about my gym strategy. I used to be a gym rat. And this is also a lot of things with do-it-yourselfers. They used to have time to do it themselves. They didn't have kids. Their, business was young, whatever else. Like, they had an appetite and time for this. And so they say, oh, I know how to do this. That's similar with me in my gym workout. I used to work out all the time. I didn't have kids. I'd go to the gym, 5 to 7 days a week, and it was no problem. And I could spend all my time there and I'd get the workout that I wanted. Nowadays, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to commit to the gym. I'm going to go to the gym for an hour a day, and I'm going to do it at 6 o'clock in the morning. And that way I'm off to a good start. The problem is, if I don't feel like I have that hour, I go, oh man, I can't go to the gym today. I could have gone for 20 minutes. I could have just, done something quick, but then I didn't get the thing I wanted done. And so what happens is I miss that day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same with the do-it-yourself investor. Is they say, I'm going to do this. They get really hot and heavy about it, and then they miss that day. And the problem is, when you miss that one day, it's really hard to jump to the next day and just be like, day gone. I'm just going to keep moving forward. And then they miss that month and that 3 months and that whatever else. And how many times do we hear from do-it-yourself investors of, oh, I meant to do that, but I just forgot to, or I got busy or whatever else, and now I can't do it.
Well, there are only really a couple of days in the year where the investment return difference between those that are invested on those days or not are tremendously different.
Yeah, there's a very small amount of days that really make a significantly higher amount of returns than people want to believe.
So I think behavior is a huge thing to mix into that, because the behavior ultimately will, and the experience will ultimately dictate as well the investment strategy.
Investment strategy is, I think when you look at what percentage builds up, it's funny how showing up is such a big contribution to what the level of success is. And that, I think, is where having a good discipline, having a good process, having accountability, that is one of the keys to kind of making sure that you get on the success train. And knowing if you are even getting up and being there and doing it successfully usually requires someone telling you, yes, you're doing a good job of it, or you're not. And so it's worth even having conversations with someone just to be able to know, hey, am I at least showing up right? Am I working out right? Or am I hitting the right equipment? Or am I, going to attain my goals? That's another question. But am I even showing up?
Right. Am I not going to injure myself?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, that's even level 2. It's, did I even show up to the gym, or am I actually just like in a room? Like, some people don't even know that. And, that's, I think most people nowadays, or it's getting better with financial education and financial literacy. I would say that client nowadays is generally more educated, but that doesn't make it any easier, because sometimes that education, you show up and you use the wrong equipment to work the wrong muscle, and then you do end up hurting yourself. And that's probably the point that the most educated and the people who feel most assured in what they're doing. I mean, we work with financial professionals, people who work in this industry, who have MBAs and understand investing and have worked at investment banks for long times. And they are actually some of the people who recognize and value the service that we do in investing more than anyone else, because they realize, if I was doing this myself, I'd be selling at the wrong point. I'd be buying at the wrong. I would never be buying at the lows. I'd always building that discipline.
Well, they have their own preconceived notions. If we go back to just the original conversation.
Well, they read their company's research report that day, and it goes, "Oh my God, it's all about that," and they go, "Oh my God, it's about that." And what did I, So I mean, that is absolutely having someone that you trust, that has the background and sophistication to understand where you're coming from, but also know the benefit of good habit, just showing up, doing this is going to lead to this impact, and being able to communicate that effectively. That's actually a lot more valuable than it seems when we're all emotionally stable and in a good place. It's when you go emotionally unstable that having someone with that stability and just that, understanding, that's when it really has a huge impact.
Well, I am glad that we both have our chef jackets on and that we're in the kitchen together. 1,000 business owners, exit ready by 2036. 10 years
10
in the
years.
books.
Let's do it, baby.
Cent'anni, salute. Oh, you enjoy. All right, guys, listen. Hey, if you want to learn more from Jordan, you know where to find him, grwealthplan.com. We've got a couple of downloads. You could do the how to avoid the number one mistake business owners make. You could do 5 moves to sell your business like a boss. The book is going to be available. Launches in March, available end of February. Ebook is available, so take a look if you are interested in finding more about that. And that's a wrap.
Hey guys, Bobby Mascia here. If you've been listening to Business Unchained, you know we're creating conversations that matter, real stories and strategies to help business owners and entrepreneurs win. We've been putting a lot of work into these episodes in our online community, bringing you content that can actually move the needle for your business. And we're everywhere: Instagram, LinkedIn, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, TikTok, you name it, we're there. So look, if you're getting value from what we're doing, please follow, subscribe, and drop a quick comment or like. It really helps us grow this thing. Just search Business Unchained and you'll find us everywhere.